People often ask what makes a leader, and though many answers exist, I'm convinced that one of the keys, rarely spoken about but absolutely essential, is the capacity to notice. Leaders approach the same problem that 100 or 1,000 or even 1,000,000 people walk past, yet they stop. They ask a different question. Why does it have to be this way? And how can I change it? The woman you are about to meet noticed that millions of people living on the edges of the world's second largest freshwater lake, Lake Tanganyka in Africa, did not have access to good medical care. There were many reasons: war and drought and political strife and poverty and the presence of 4 different nations. And then she had an idea. If you could build a floating health clinic, then you could bring medicine to these people. And if there was some sort of instability, well, you could just float away. In just 6 years, the Lake Tanganyka Floating Health Clinic has brought high-quality medical care to over 300,000 people, doing so in a systemic fashion that has addressed environmental and ecological and community and economic needs as much as the medicine. The founder, the visionary behind it, is Dr. Amy Lehman. One of the things that really caught my attention about the way you do your work in Africa is that you're not bringing in foreign doctors. Instead, you're working to build the capacity locally. And I wonder if you could talk some about why you're doing that and also what you've seen. Have you seen people there, given the chance, really grow in their abilities, in their capacity as leaders?
Well, first and foremost, you know, the countries around Lake Tanganyika are not my, you know, those aren't my countries, right? I'm there because of, you know, collaboration and partnership with, you know, governments and ministries inside the government, etc. And, you know, again, not to be a Debbie Downer, but there's a lot wrong with humanitarian and development aid because it's very top down. It's very like, we know the answers to your problems. And in fact, that is really often not the case, particularly in rural to ultra-rural communities that for the most part, right, are pretty disconnected from like a system of communication and sort of and data collection even. Like, we don't even know what's really going on in a lot of these places because of real supply chain and communications barriers. So this idea that we know, you know, because we're white and we're rich is offensive, right? It's offensive because we might not know, you know, and again, in the spirit of kind of scientific inquiry, et cetera, you know, this is not only from kind of an ethical perspective of like respecting the viewpoints of others. This is like science. This is like, do you empirically know what is going on in an environment? Can you, you know, parse what the issues are? You know, can you characterize, you know, what these problems are? You know, and it's often really hard to do that from the outside. You know, you can't, you know, you can't find the answers to these questions. You can't empirically know unless you go from the ground up. I say to people all the time, don't be a solution trolling for a problem, right? Like, understand actually what the problems really are and what people really want, and then build a solution that's based on that. Don't think, oh, I have a great idea and I'm going to inflict it on you. You know, what if it's not the right, what if it's contextually inappropriate or whatever. Or there's certain barriers, right, to kind of integrating that thing in a real way. So I think that's the kind of general answer as to, why often that's just kind of the right way of going about things anyway. But from a, sort of a local capacity building perspective, I mean, of course, we want African healthcare workers, right? That's the problem, right? People don't, there are no educational opportunities, again, in terms of, being in a low resource setting. I mean, we're trying to reverse those things. We're not trying to populate, with, doctors who are like taking a month to do some humanitarian work, which is fine. Again, in the right context, it's fine. But that's not a long-term solution. And so if what you're trying to do is health systems building, then you want to increase the local capacity of healthcare workers who want to be and work in that area.
What do you look for? Because you said some interesting, do you look for in finding the right people to invest in? How do you know this is a person who I think we can build their capacity?
Well, I think part of it is showing up. People who show up, right, and say I'm interested, and they also show up in ways that should put us to shame about our own sense of like what's inconvenient. I mean, showing up in that part of the world sometimes means taking a 2-day boat ride in like a wobbly boat, going, leaving your family, and going to be in a place that you've never been before, or something like that. And so, when you say to people, we're doing this kind of outreach, we're working on this project, we're trying to do this, we're interested in community health workers and, who is interested in participating. Just the desire to show up, means that they have to surmount a lot. It's an effort. To me, shows me a lot of just heart and will, of wanting to do this thing. And I also think that when you say to another person, I believe in you, you can do this, you can do this job, that actually does make people feel like, oh, maybe I can. A lot of this is not rocket science. There are certain things in medicine and certain kinds of treatments and certainly in the world that we live in of, tertiary care, high-tech medicine. There's some complexity involved. But the truth is that, the biggest bang for, the healthcare dollar is on kind of a low-tech public health related ideas. Like the reason why we live so long now is not because we know how to do, super fancy surgery or whatever. It's because we have clean water and we have vaccinations and we have, more universal access to, primary and secondary education. And, we, understand things about, nutritious foods and that it's important, when a kid is little that they don't get sick, so their brain can grow. It's like, it's like that's kind of, that's the sort of juicy part of, improving people's general health. And for those things, why does somebody need to go to medical school for that? Or, for that matter, why does somebody even have to have completed primary school? If they're, if they're smart and they have heart and they have will and they care about their communities and they're willing to learn and listen and participate, you know, why wouldn't we want them to do that? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that people who, you know, are engineers, or people who, you know, are environmental science people, or, you know, people who work in agriculture or whatever, I mean, like, that's why, you know, our approach in the Lake Tanganyika Basin is to work across sector. Because when you're talking about creating, you know, building blocks for a functional civil society, I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. You basically need to create a foundation that includes, you know, healthcare, but also includes some of these fundamental other building blocks that are really very interrelated. So for me, you know, the community health worker is like an ideal person to do a lot of the kinds of kind of foundational work that we're trying to do. The person's invested in the community, they're trusted by the community, and they care about what happens. You know, unlike somebody who they care, let me just say, they care about it in a way that's different from somebody who like dive bombs in for a little while and then leaves, right? It's different.
What message would you give to young people going to schools like Choate today? Would you have a message for them?
Don't be a jerk.
Okay.
I mean, you know, like, regardless of kind of where you come from, the fact that you're at a place like Choate, like, that's a really powerful tool in many ways. Yeah. To have access to that type of education. And, you know, maybe take advantage of that and don't be selfish about it. You know, what can I say? I think that when you're young and excited about stuff, that's very, very powerful engine to fuel, you know, future activities and decisions. But it's also really hard work. And the whole kind of passion issue, to me, is, you know, an interesting one. Because clearly it's important to be passionate, engaged about, you know, what you do. It helps a lot. But you also need skills. You need facts and skills in order to, you know, accomplish stuff. And a lot of the kind of, you know, there's kind of a slog, right? Of going through, you know, all the kind of basic stuff in life to really build something that's meaningful, really have the capacity to you know, execute something meaningful. And that's true, you know, in any field, right? If you're a musician and you don't practice, it really doesn't matter how brilliant you are. You know, you're probably not going to reach a level of excellence, you know, without kind of that discipline and the basic skill building. So I see that being in schools like Choate that, you know, have wonderful educational opportunities where you can do a lot of thinking and a lot of skill building, you know, like, take that seriously. Those things help.
In these past 6 years, what would you say has surprised you the most? Have you had any big surprises as you've sought to achieve your mission and craft?
It's all a surprise. I mean, it's like the kinds of things that have taken place, and, you know, this sort of interesting, fortuitous, I don't know, just anywhere from, meeting certain types of people or being in a certain place right at the right time. To me, a lot of this has been, super surprising, but I guess I would frame it in a different way and say, again, that if you're open-minded and receptive to what's going on, what's going on in the world, then I think things that don't necessarily seem on first pass to be, opportunities or sort of essential moments, actually sometimes can be. And so again, that kind of openness is very important.
As a leader, because you are, you're leading this organization and you are the one who's sort of waking up and leading a lot of these community health workers in Africa. Have you had any surprises in terms of seeing people accomplish things that in the beginning nobody would have predicted?
In that sense, am I always like pleased and happy to see those going on? Yes, I am. But I actually have the expectation that people can do a lot. So I'm not surprised when people rise to the occasion and do them, because I do think that people have that capacity in them. And I think part of the problem in some of these parts of the world is that the outside world just has the lowest possible expectation of people's behavior. And in a way, just in the same kind of feedback loop of being like, I believe in you, and the person is, okay, great. no, I believe in me. Thanks. You made, great. I think that opposite negative feedback loop happens too. Like, I don't believe in you. I think you in the lowest, at the lowest kind of common denominator. I'm not, and I'm not going to give you a chance. And I think that also gets internalized. People internalize those kinds of messages too. So for me, I go and we do things, and I have the expectation that we're all going to work together and it's going to work. Sometimes it takes longer, or we take a deviated path, or we have to retool or something like that. But it's not because I think it can't happen. I think that anything can happen. I really do. Anything meaning, good and bad. Anything can happen out there. And so how you interact with that is, that's what you have control over. And so, do whatever you can that's in your power to make it, go well versus go poorly. That's it.
That's great. I'll just read back the little summary that I've jotted down notes as you've talked about your particular style in both being a leader and helping others. One of them is really pay attention to somebody showing up, their heart and their will, because that's the engine. Have high expectations. Model, and then really believe in people and give them that feedback. Is there anything more that you'd add to that Amy formula?
Don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk.
And don't be a jerk.
Don't be a jerk. Oh, well, thank you for not being a jerk, and seriously, thank you for doing what you're doing, and sharing some of what you're doing with me and with gcLi this morning. Really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye, Amy.
Bye.